we can't reach those big guns, and they just keep dropping in. There's nothing you can do. It's sort of like being a big bullseye on top of a hill, and you're just sitting there waiting. You can't be safe. You can be lucky. That's it.
You can't be safe. You can be lucky.
That's it.
My name is Lee Stewart. I was drafted here from Atlanta, Georgia, Jonesboro, Georgia, 1967. I went to Vietnam as a 11 Bravo infantryman with a Pathfinder, did a little bit of door gunning. Started with the 121 Aviation down in the Delta as a Pathfinder. And basically ended up the 173rd Airborne up in Ankei and Tuiwa until I got shot up on 17 June 68 and was medevac out. My family was supportive of me, but when I came home, nobody met me at the airport. There was no homecoming, welcome back. When I walked in the door, my younger brother, when he saw me, first thing out of his mouth was, "Did you kill anybody?" It's kind of like a shock to walk. Why can't I just leave? My family's perception of me had changed since when I left. They still loved me and understood, but they didn't actually understood what I did. I saw when I was in Vietnam, I got letters from girls I had dated in our church, started telling me that I need to turn around and leave the Army and desert, that we're baby killers and all this stuff. Where are these people getting all this trash? I'm here. That's a lie. I didn't see anything like that. Sad to say, I lost 7 of my best friends. And when you get medical evac, I was out of country, off to Japan, so I had no contact. I was never returned to the unit. And it's kind of like I had to just deal with it in myself. For years, I just put it behind me. It was this is the most traumatic day in my life, was 17 June 68. I just lucky that the good Lord let me live. And I put it away for years and years until I could start learning to deal with it myself. My dad served in World War II. My granddad, World War I. It was understood that we go and serve our country. I went and came. I thought it was a patriot to do when I get back, but how my grandfather and my father were accepted, and it was totally different. Totally different. And I just felt rejected for what I thought was the right thing to turn around and do. So in a way, I became bitter. I grew my hair long. I became a hippie. But when I sat down and I went into the building business, I did very well financially, making money hand over fist, being a builder and being houses under construction. But I found the more money I made, the less happier I was. And I finally realized that what makes me happy, my wife had asked me, what's going to take to make you happy? I had everything physically I wanted, but I was not at peace in my heart. I thought, when I felt the best about myself, when I was in Vietnam with my brothers, they're my combat brothers. That's where I felt welcome and wanted. We were all one. She goes, and she was an Army brat. Well, why don't you go back in the military? I went, you crazy? Give up all this that we got and go back in the military and start all over again? She goes, no. You want to go back to school, get you educated, and go back in as an officer. And that's what I want to do. And so I sold out everything, went there, and I went back to school full time, used my GI Bill, come back in and got my commission as an infantry officer, went back into the Rangers and Special Ops, and I ended up doing total time was 32 years and 18 days. I retired in 2002. This is why I joined them. They recruited me when I had 2 years. I was in 2000. I started flying with them, but I found every show or event that we go to, it was not only healing for me, but it was healing for the general public, the people that I didn't know, didn't exist, whatever. And I can tell you story after story how there is always, as I tell the wife, there's some kind of significant emotional event happens at every one of these. Sometimes we might not know about it, but just the interactions. And I will give you a quick example back, and I can't even remember, Kurt probably knows, but when we were in Branson, Missouri, and they brought the media down there, and they were going to film me and all that, because they wanted me, he's a Ranger and all this stuff. And the news media wanted to interview me, and I'm going, I really don't have time. They want to hear my story. I said, you want to hear the story? Look up on that ridge. And there was veterans sitting up there, one in a wheelchair, some of them just sitting there listening to us come in and last. You want some stories? Go up there. I've got myself. And they went up there, and they came back at the end of the day, and the guy, I just want to tell you, thank you. What amazing stories. See, I knew, I didn't go up, but as a vet, and we all know those vets, I can look and tell it's very what it did for him, hearing those blades, just being able to watch. Some want to come get in it. Some want to fly. Some just want to touch it. Some family members. I've had a lady that she did not know her husband at all when we was in Vietnam. She married him. He was an Army medevac pilot. We flew her, and when she got off the aircraft, she's like in a trance, walking away. I'm, ma'am, you got to come this way. We got to. She asked me, are you a pilot? And they call me that sometimes. She started, well, my husband was a medevac pilot, dust-off pilot, as we call him, in Vietnam, and now I understand. I didn't know what he did. He told me all his stories. I couldn't relate, and he passed away. But now she felt like she had brought closure on her life with him, even though she wasn't around to be able to fly in something that he had told her about. That's the value of what this does. You don't read about it. It's not just reading it or seeing on a static display pole. You actually feel, touch, breathe, and the interaction of the people. So this is what keeps me, as I call, sane. I'm always running into all sorts of folks that we served with or in there at the same time and stuff.
Okay. My name's Jim Brennan. I'm a retired CW4, Vietnam helicopter pilot, 1968 and 69. Flew with the 1st Cav Division back then. 4.5 years active, and then short break of service, wound up in the Georgia Guard and retired out of Georgia Guard December of 2008, and finished with about 37 years and a handful of months of military service. I got my draft notice, but I wanted to kind of program my own future. So when I got my draft notice, I had already applied to go to the Navy Marine flight program. And I was accepted. It took a physical and stuff like that. I had a date for September of 1968 to go, but that didn't eliminate you from the draft. So because of that, I got drafted. And when that happened, I went down and signed up. I had already taken a lot of the tests. I took another physical for the Army, and I had a friend of mine who was about 2 months ahead of me in college, and he was already in the program, so I knew about it, and that's how I ended up going to flight school. I was single when I left. No specific girlfriends or anything like that, but obviously being in the military, I finished college, 2 years of college, a junior college, and so you got into it a system a lot more regimented, as opposed to being a single guy and kind of doing what I want when I wanted to do it. But those things change when you get in the Army. So it became more structured and regimented. And then the good news is when I got back from Vietnam, I ultimately met my future wife, and we've been married now for 43 years. I was fortunate when I got back. I came from a community, even though when we came back, a lot of Vietnam veterans didn't get the parades and accolades. That didn't bother me. I know I didn't get exposed to people spitting on me or calling me a baby killer or stuff like that. I grew up in a community that supported the military, even back then. So when I got back home, it was all hugs and let me buy you a beer and stuff like that. So I consider myself one of the fortunate ones in that aspect. I never got any grief from people that were the anti-war movement, so to speak. So I don't have any specific story, only because I grew up from an area that was pro-military, pro-soldier and sailor and marine and so on and so forth. So nothing specific. I was fortunate in that aspect. Yeah, I keep up every Christmas time. I have a handful of people I call. I'm kind of like the point man. I call one guy, and then when I call the next guy, I've heard from Norm. I heard from Gary or whatever the case may be. So I to this day I still keep in contact with a handful of guys I flew with in Vietnam. I joined the Sky Soldiers. I joined the Sky Soldiers in 1999. They were doing a little thing up at a VHPA reunion, Vietnam Helicopter Pilot Association. And they had a little booth set up there in Nashville, actually. And I went by and found out where they were at. I said, well, I'd like to be involved in that. And so I signed up when I was at a VHPA reunion. And because they're close, so I spent a lot of time in the early on. They started, I guess, in 97. I joined in 99. I was still in the Guard, so I was doing the aviation, the Heritage Foundation, at the same time I was doing the Guard. So I didn't get to do a lot of shows, because when I wasn't at my real job, my civilian job, I was doing Guard stuff. But then in 08, when I retired, I was able to get more involved in the actual air shows. And so I've been with the organization for quite a while. Since I've been with them, I had an opportunity to get qualified in that Cobra. I didn't fly the Cobra on active duty, but I did got enough legs, just flying as a sandbag in the Cobra at different places. It took about 3 years, and I finally got qualified in the Cobra, but the UE is my mainstay in aircraft.
Jeffrey Zito, Chief Warrant Officer 5, United States Army, retired. Served in the Republic of Vietnam from 1971 to 72 with the 74th Reconnaissance Airplane Company flying O-1D Bird Dogs. I was raised in an Italian-American family, and my father was very mostly, you do what you got to do, and there wasn't a lot of discussion about your responsibility. So, and I think the American family today is different. You don't have as much self-responsibility as you did back then. And so, while I felt away from them and I felt afar, I felt like I was doing what I needed to do. I think today, which I think is incredible, the American public is very much recognizing the commitment of what the American military does to sacrifice for our freedom. So it's wonderful to see in airports open displays of affection and recognition. When I got back from Vietnam, I came through Travis Air Force Base on my way to Fort Rucker to be a flight instructor there. And I took my uniform off at Travis and put on civilian clothes, because nobody liked this back then. When I arrived in Charleston, South Carolina off a commercial flight, and I was in the taxi going to my folks' house, and this was February 1972, the cab driver said to me, "Are you military?" And I said, "Yes." He wanted to pull the taxi over and let me out. And, you're just doing what you're supposed to do. You feel like your obligation to the country. So I think it's great today that they're recognizing the value of the troops and they're embracing it. That makes people want to be there. So erasing that for some of our Vietnam vets may be a little bit difficult to do. You weren't very well welcome. There were 10 people in my flight class, and I know where every single one of them are today. I vacation with some of them. I see them as often as I can. We had some of us had parallel careers, and some of us went off and did completely other things. But because I think we had a very small flight class, the helicopter folks, I went through the fixed wing program. The helicopter folks had a much, much larger class. Could be 200-300 graduates per class, where ours was only 10. So I can tell you their names. I can tell you the names of their wives and their kids. So, well, I'm blessed that I had some skills from my corporate life after as I left active duty, I went to the reserves and stayed in the reserves for 34 years. So I left after 40 total years. So while I was in the reserves, I could have a parallel civilian career. And I happened to go through law school. The VA helped pay for that and got into a career. So I ended up with some skills that I think were very well needed here. So I'm fortunate to be the corporate general counsel for the foundation. I'm also their corporate secretary, so I handle all the legal work, contracts, administration, insurance, and things of that nature. I happen to be a pilot, both helicopters and fixed wing. So the good part is we toil every day in helping this foundation do the things it's got to do. What the fun part, though, is getting out and interacting with other veterans that haven't had a chance to be with the Huey. So I call it a Huey high, where we get to go out and fly the aircraft and we come back and you feel so good. That's just the really important part of why I think most of our veterans participate in this organization, is that they can be part of bringing that back to the vets from Vietnam.
Okay, my name is Terry Garlock. I was a warrant officer. I flew Cobras with the 334th Attack Helicopter Company out of Benoit in the Dragon Platoon. Almost all of my friends and brothers that flew in Vietnam flew much more combat than I did, because a little less than halfway through my tour, I was shot down and hurt pretty bad and medevaced home. And those injuries ended my flying days. So I got out of the military with an early out. I was no longer flying. Not interested in making the military a career. And like a lot of guys who came home from Vietnam, I put it behind me, got on with life, and tried to forget about it. And did not stay in touch with anybody for a considerable period of time. I was married, I was 21. My wife was a bit immature and begged me to run away to Canada to get away from it. But never crossed my mind to avoid service. My dad was career Navy. He did what he needed to do in World War II. So I did my duty. Army Aviation Heritage Foundation. I'm a life member. I'm not out here very often, but I'm a supporter. It helps keep the history alive, and that's pretty important. My second marriage was in '92. Neither my wife nor I had children in our first marriages, and I now have 2 children by adoption from China. First one was when I was 50 years old. When I started to think about the kind of crap they would learn about the Vietnam War, I decided I needed to write a book, and that's what started this project. So it took me over a period of 5 years. Worked on the book. Each chapter in here is about a different vet. In between each chapter is a short piece about another vet and how they were treated when they came home. Finished the book in 2011, early, and felt like when I got it finished, now I can die in peace. So I got it all down on paper, so that's where the book came from. And I'll tell you, because you'd have to be very insightful to ask a question like this, what I discovered in this project is the very best way to get a veteran's story, even if he lived next door, is to tell him, go home, put a do not disturb sign on the door, get a comfortable chair and a headset, and call me, and I'll record it. And I would only ask a question once in a while to redirect them or to maybe fill in a gap, but mostly I would keep my mouth shut. And with no eyes on him, not even my own, the real story would come out. And the real story is often in between the lines. And that's how I got the story.
I'm Gene Newton. When I went to Vietnam, I was a POC. Got promoted specialist over there at the very end because they had frozen all the promotions and everything for the military, so we couldn't get promoted and everything. But you know, they did lift that just about the time that the war was over, and I was with the H Troop, 10th Air Cavalry, a little it was a pretty good sized place called Lane Army Heliport, northeast of Queen Yan, and we flew the Cobras, Hueys, and Loaches. Vietnam, if anybody that went to Vietnam saying Vietnam didn't change them, then, you know, it changed everybody in different ways. You know, if you lost a good friend, or, you know, you were involved in the day-to-day operations and things like this, and you saw people that didn't make it back, yeah, it was, you know, it was hard. It was hard. I was lucky. I got stationed after leaving Vietnam back to Fort Rucker, Alabama. Well, of course, that's where most of the pilots got transferred back to and everything. So there was a lot of guys there in our unit that was there, and you know, so we often had go out on weekends, you know, get something to eat, parties, stuff like that. Yeah. And even after I got off active duty, there was some that I had kept up with, but like anything in a long distance relationship, you know, months go by and I've got to call him or stuff like this, and it'd be, you know, months and months before you could ever think, oh, okay, I got to call him. And yeah, I really, one of my really good friends, which we were there at Fort Rucker and in Vietnam, I found he had gotten out and went to work for the Army National Guard in Texas, and I kept trying to call him, never to get an answer, and finally ran into another old cohort, and he told me that Paul had, Jerry Paul was his name, and that Jerry had died of a massive heart attack, and he was only in his 40s. You know. So, yeah, it was, you know, when I came, even after I finished up my tour there at Fort Rucker and got out, I was single and everything. Of course, my parents lived there where we were from, there in Marietta or Powder Springs, Georgia, and you know, just have faith in your family, and you know that they're your support group when you come back, and your friends, some of my old friends, but also some newer friends that I met that were still active in the Guard and stuff like this. So after I got off active duty, I got a job with the Army National Guard in Georgia. We flew the OV-1 Mohawk, and we had I guess I had a situation there one day where we were going out for a flight, and we had already pre-flighted the aircraft. Mr. Brennan, he was CW-4. He was flown in World War II, Korea, and Vietnam, and had thousands and thousands of hours in just about every aircraft imaginable. I mean, it's just one of those people that, you know, who's just natural pilot. And just about the time we were, matter of fact, we had already cranked number one engine and fixed to crank number two. And I told him, I looked up and I says, Mr. Brennan, I said, we got Jeep coming down the flight line. I says, I don't know if he's going to come down here or not, but sure enough, he did. He pulled up, and it was our flight operations officer. And so he asked me if, he came up and talking to Mr. Brennan. We didn't shut number one engine down, and he told him that would I? He asked me if I would let this other guy fly this mission because he was an Atlanta policeman and he had late shift that evening, go back to work, and he needed some flight time to get his minimums in for the month. And I said, oh, sure. I said, I can go, and, he says, we've got some missions next week. We'll send you on. I said, absolutely no problem. Climbed out, got him back in the harness and everything because it did have ejection seats. So we went ahead, got him in. They got started. I went ahead and did the flight check with them, sent them out on their way. Make a long story short, probably in the next 10 minutes or so, I was down at the mess hall eating lunch, and one of the guys come running in and looking for our CO, and I thought, something's wrong. So I immediately jumped up, and I knew the person. I said, what's the matter? And he didn't say anything. He said, have you seen our commander? And I said, he was here just a second ago. I said, what's the matter? And he didn't say anything. So I knew there was something bad had happened. And so when I started following them outside, I asked him, I said, what's happened? And all he did was turn and look basically south, and I could see the smoke. And I said, oh my God, did they eject? And by then everybody was, really scattered and trying to get to the crash site. And luckily I had my car down there with me. I jumped in my car and went flying down US 41 there, right at the end of Dobbins. And unfortunately, both of them had perished. The guy that had taken my place had tried to eject. Well, he did eject, but they were in such an envelope that he didn't have enough time for a chute or anything to open. And Mr. Brennan didn't have time to get out. So they both perished there on that Sunday afternoon. And it was very hard on me because you start questioning yourself. Oh my God, did I miss something on the pre-flight? Did I miss something on the run-up that, and everything? And they had the investigation, but it was a mechanical failure. Nothing that they had done. They were trying to get back to the runway. And they didn't make it. And I was in that aircraft before he was. If he hadn't taken my place, who knows, mechanical thing might not ever happen. But then again, it did happen. And I guess being that close, in that length of time, it was tough on me there for quite a while. And I decided to go ahead and get out of the Guard after a while. And my wife knew how much, because I always talked about flying to Huey and telling her about the things and everything. And she found out about the foundation. And I had seen the aircraft down here out back. But it took me a while to come back. And then once it was a little difficult at first, but after that, it was just like, oh my God, I've been flying with these guys just about all my life, I mean, that's what it felt like. And we all have some kind of similar stories and memories, and you know, we look and somebody was in. Yeah, I was with this unit. Really? Well, I was too, but you know, a year or two after we just, you know, passed in the going. So.
Stories like that.
Yeah.
People even ended up in the same hospital, just like moments apart.
Yeah, yeah, yes, and but with this group here, we're very close, tight knit, and you could make a phone call to any of these guys and tell them I need help or whatever. They would be, and we all know that they would be right there with us, just like the camaraderie and brotherhood, you know, in Vietnam. It's here in this group just as much as it was out there.